And we have some very special guests with us, Nancy Shepard, Leonard Johnson, and Dick Perkins, who are going to do most of the talking today. But we wanted to start off just by showing a quick video that was done by Dylan Smith. He's Clifton Smith's, Clifton Van Smith's,
grandson.
Seven. Sorry, screwed that up. Which we had a very hard time getting to work on here, but we think that it will. The secret, apparently, to getting this to play on the television is to close the laptop. We gave up, closed it, and it worked.
Marble Hill, located off Great Road and Harvard Road in Stow, is a beautiful walking trail, place for exercise, and a wildlife lookout where people have found peace within the woods. As a Stow resident myself, my parents and grandparents brought me here often while growing up. I've spent countless hours walking, running, and exploring Marble Hill, as well as other public conservation lands nearby. Yet, with land development a constant presence in Massachusetts, I often wondered how the land like Marble Hill has remained untouched. How did Marble Hill come to be preserved? Who led the initiative? To answer that, we need to look back at the 1960s, when the conservation movement in Stow was just beginning. In 1966, Stow was a much more rural community than it is today.
When I moved to Stow, it was still very much a rural community. This was in 1966. And there were less than 2,000 people in the town. I remember Franny Warren and his town clerk kept a tabulation of the number of people. So it was still very much a rural community. And that began when Route 495 went through that change, and digital equipment was spending so rapidly in Maynard. That changed pretty dramatically. The town began to be developed a lot, and we began to lose some of the really beautiful, pristine places in town.
This was true. Just 9 years earlier, in 1957, construction had begun on Route 495, which quickly funneled people and technology into the more rural parts of central Massachusetts. As more people moved in, development followed, and suburban neighborhoods started popping up all around. From 1960 to 1970, Stow's population surged by 55%, from 2,573 to nearly 4,000 residents, an increase that mirrored the broader trend in the state. Across central Massachusetts, vast tracts of natural land were being replaced with residential development and roads, with little thought given to conservation. By the mid-1900s, much of former farm and grazing lands were in the process of reforesting themselves, and many Stow residents enjoyed hiking, cross-country skiing, and riding horses on informal trails that had sprung up all around. Two of those residents, Leonard Johnson, formerly of Red Acre Road, and the late Thomas Shepard of Harvard Road, enjoyed the rural character of Stow.
We loved all the different paths there were near where we lived, and we used to, there was a path that went off of Harvard Road, and you could go from there up a path that led you to the top of Marble Hill, and then you could go down sort of the other side, and eventually you would come out on Taylor Road. But Tom had a vision that I think that the trust has done a little bit to try to make almost a circle of trails in Stow. Not more than just Marble Hill, but that was an important beginning to it.
They both saw how quickly development was progressing, and they worried about the consequences for open land. They understood that without intervention, Stow's historic rural character and its natural charm could be lost forever. As housing developments spread rapidly throughout neighboring towns, they were determined to protect a parcel of land that would preserve Stow's quality.
Tom Shepard, who was a good friend of mine, and I got a group together, and we talked about preserving land, and we just didn't quite gel. So Tom and I decided that if we're going to start this whole enterprise going, we needed to act ourselves. So we agreed that if some project came up and the two of us could buy it, we'd buy it.
The hunt for the perfect piece of land began, and after searching around the town, Johnson and Shepard found what they were looking for: a large, undeveloped parcel of over 100 acres owned by Bill Peck, located between Great Road, Harvard Road, and Taylor Road. This land had once been used for grazing farm animals, as evidenced by the stone walls that still lie on the property, but it had since become a forest of white pines and hemlocks. With its natural beauty and close proximity to the town center, the land was ideal for conservation.
I think it was probably Herb Potter who would have known that we were interested in that, and he knew Bill Peck. The Pecks lived down at the base of Harvard Road, just off of Great Road, and they had lived in town for a very long time. And Bill owned this property of what is now 250 acres roughly.
Negotiations with landowner Bill Peck began, and soon Johnson and Shepard were able to purchase the land.
And so it was over 5 years, so my share was $50,000, so I paid $10,000 a year. And he wanted to space it out over 5 years for tax reasons, so he paying the capital gains tax, it would be more adverse for him to do it all in 1 year, and it was much better for us, obviously.
However, their goal was not to keep the land in private hands, but to eventually make it accessible to everyone in Stow. They knew they would need road access for trailheads, and so, as part of their process, they sold off unneeded plots on Taylor Road to fund the purchase of lots on Harvard Road. These new lots would provide ample trailhead parking and road access to Marble Hill. Once the land had been prepared for public access, they made an offer to the town of Stow. Remarkably, instead of seeking profit, Johnson and Shepard proposed selling the land to the town for exactly what they had paid, $160,000 in total, which covered the original purchase from Peck, as well as the additional lots. The town voted unanimously in May of 1975 to authorize the Conservation Commission, with the approval of Stow's selectmen, to purchase the 185-acre property. The town raised the necessary funds by issuing municipal bonds to be paid off over 20 years and sought reimbursement from the state and federal government for at least half of the cost. This purchase also included 72 acres of land owned by the heirs of Charles E.D. Fletcher, bought for $50,400, which further expanded the town's protected open space.
Some initial purchases by some individuals brought people to recognize how important it was to preserve open space, to preserve the character of the town. And that's what this is really all about, preserving the character of the town.
The town's overall goal was to increase Stow's percentage of open space from just 5%, about 600 acres, to 15 to 20%, ensuring that future development would not erase the town's natural beauty and rural character. After the purchase, Marble Hill was transformed into a public space that reflected the town's commitment to conservation and recreation. Over the years, Stow has added various features such as a parkour active trail named the Head Life Course in memory of a former Stow resident. As they hike, visitors can engage in physical exercises at the different stations. Today, the hill is a beloved destination for families and friends who enjoy outdoor walks together. Visitors can hike to the peak, which reaches a maximum of 347 feet, or navigate to the broken down cars near the back of the property. The length of the hiking trail that runs through the property is about 3.4 miles round trip and winds through mature oak, maple, hemlock, and white pine trees. There are 4 different trails, including the green, white, red, and yellow, which are clearly marked. With its well-maintained paths and manageable terrain, Marble Hill offers an escape from the busy hum of daily life. As I walk these trails today, I think about the foresight and legwork that went into securing this land. The great effort that Leonard Johnson and Thomas Shepard made to conserve Marble Hill has ensured that future generations will continue to enjoy this special place.
Thank you, Devin.
And I didn't see Dick Perkins' name there, but I know he's really
He
involved.
has, and he's right here.
Well,
And I'm about to
I do
introduce him.
recognize him, yeah.
Thanks, Kathy.
So Dick is a board member of Stow Conservation Trust and has been at this for a long time. Dick's going to make a few remarks and introduce Leonard, and then Nancy.
Great. Hey, Nancy. So it's hard to believe that it's 50 years since this happened.
We're getting old, Dick.
It feels like only yesterday. But it was really one of the key points along the way in Stow developing such a strong environmental and conservation ethic. And just great congratulations to Leonard and to Tom for taking the ball and making that happen. I was just thinking about it again and saying, wow, you know, we were really at a very difficult point. There was lots going on. We had recently failed to protect what now is Harvard Acres, which could have been another major conservation effort. We couldn't get the money. And so with this, there was a feeling of we were moving forward. And within a couple of years, we started the Stow Conservation Trust to also help with the Conservation Commission to further our commitment to conservation. Our town is, I'm so proud to say, is different than a lot of our neighboring towns now, which have grown so exponentially that they're no longer what we came to live at, if you will. So just wanted to start with that kind of a thought. We're fortunate that Leonard was there. I want to tell you just a minute about Leonard, and that's my major goal, is to introduce this great guy. Leonard and Patty and their family lived in Stow, and in 1969, our house burned, and Leonard and Patty had just finished putting together an addition on their house and hadn't even moved in yet. And they invited us to come and camp out while we figured out what we were going to do next. That was really, they were so generous. It was just great. And never will forget it, Patty. It was very, very nice of them. Leonard was very much involved in the community and was on the finance committee, a great finance committee. It was Bruce Bean was a
Dave Smith,
yeah.
and Tom was on
And
it.
Tom.
he talked me into going on the committee. He knew I had a background in finance, and I realized that his motive in getting me on the committee was so that he could get off.
He's not here to defend himself.
He would agree, he told me so.
Leonard not only did this Marble Hill project, but he also was on the board of the Red Acre Farm, and thereby later on was very instrumental in helping us put together a purchase of the Red Acre land for the Stow Conservation Trust. And I don't, who knows whether it would have happened without Leonard, but he was very much a part of it. So that was all good. Well, then they moved away. We were all pretty sad, but they landed in Falmouth, and Leonard kept up the good work and has a whole bunch of credits for conservation work over the years. Right now, he's finishing up a 10-year term as the president of the Compact for Cape Cod Conservation Trusts. Did I get that right? Which is it's basically the umbrella organization for all the land trusts on the Cape. So he's kept a central role in conservation right along. And I think we're all just really happy to introduce Leonard and have him tell us a few good stories.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to bring my chair if that's acceptable.
Before you sit down, Vic,
Yeah.
could you tell us how long you've been involved in conservation in Stow and maybe your history with the Stow Conservation Trust?
Well, about 100 years, I'm not sure.
Put it this way, he's never left.
Yes, it was. Well, we started the Conservation Trust now going on 48 years ago. And I was one of the founders to doing that. Before we founded the trust, we'd already been working on, we'd been failing at doing good conservation. Tom had done a great job earlier on helping to protect this town forest, which was really our first big project. And I think probably it's okay to say at this point, but one of Tom's employees was Dick Corzine. And so Tom sort of closed the eye, and Dick Corzine spent a huge amount of time putting together that project that eventually led to buying the town forest from C.D. Fletcher and family. So having always been a friend of Tom's, I guess I could say my conservation and Stow work started way back then, but it's kept on going, and I've been a member of the board of Stow Conservation Trust since its foundation.
Go on and talk about things I've learned in years in conservation, but I really want to highlight the Stow Acres project. I'd gotten to know Bob Wilbur at the Massachusetts Land Trust Coalition annual meetings, and I realized that he lived just down the Red Acre Road from where we used to live, and attended the discussions he had about various conservation issues. And a year and a half ago, he came to the annual conference we have. It's a convocation of the Cape Cod Conservation Trust and the land trust from Southeast Massachusetts. And I had the pleasure of introducing Bob, and then he talked about the Stow Acres project, which you all are familiar with. But that put the bee in our bonnet, because there was a general feeling among conservation people and among affordable housing people on the Cape that they were mutually exclusive issues. And Bob made it very clear that was not the case. So in the year and a half since then, we've done in Falmouth, I've been involved with 2 deals that involve preserving conservation land, and on the parcel that's already disturbed, they're building affordable housing. In one case, there's a 56-acre parcel in North Falmouth that's been on our radar list at the Land Trust in Falmouth for our full 40 years. And finally, there was a change in ownership, and the old buzzard who owned it and hated the town and hated everybody else died. And so it came up for purchase, and a nice guy bought it. So, but there were 7 acres that were disturbed with that 56. And an old couple of derelict buildings, including a derelict house. And so we made a deal with the Habitat for Humanity to build 14 affordable housing units on those 7 acres. And they'll have a separate entrance from the conservation entrance and so forth. And then we did another deal in East Falmouth on the main Route 28 highway, where there was a derelict house, but fabulous land behind that had connection to other land that was owned by the state. And we were able to put that deal together. The Land Trust does not own it. We did all the work. We advanced the money for the state and so forth and so on. But again, there'll be 5 units on the highway where the old house was torn down, and the fabulous land behind, which is one huge kettle hole and another pond, will be preserved for conservation. So it's not a mutually exclusive process that you can get together and do it. And we were able to get the town to change their funding for affordable housing. The plan had been, what they had done is they restricted the funds that the town has set aside from community preservation. And
Are you in Falmouth or
I'm in
Stowe?
Falmouth.
Okay.
I'm in Falmouth. I'm sorry, I'm in Falmouth. And there's funds that the selectmen control or put aside from the voted by town meeting to put aside into a reserve fund. And those funds had been restricted just to construction. And we had realized after losing out on a couple of projects to a developer where we were trying to do one of these combination projects, that the affordable housing people needed money to buy the land, if that's what we were trying to do. And they couldn't do it all privately under their own auspices. So we got the town to change, and the town now will put money forward to help you buy the land for affordable housing, not just for construction. So I'm sorry I confused you to talking about
It's all interconnected, so.
It all is interconnected. And there are lots of reasons I feel in recent years that it's nice to live in Massachusetts. And one of the reasons is that you may or may not know this, but there are more land trusts in Massachusetts than any other state in the country by a considerable margin. So there's, going all the way back to the trustees, there's been a statewide ethic, and the state support is just fabulous. It's just terrific. I mean, this project in Falmouth that we cost us, this 57 acres cost $6 million. The state is putting in $1 million, the town is putting in $1 million, and so we don't have to raise all the money privately. We're raising $2 million, a little over $2 million privately, and then Habitat's putting in some money too. So, but these partnerships are terrific. They can be fairly complicated. You get the state involved and the town, and who knows who else is involved. And part of it's affordable housing and part of it's conservation. It gets very complicated, but it's worth it. I'm going to sign off.
That could turn you right back to the Stow Acres project. That wasn't simple.
Exactly. It's very complicated. Yeah. And it's also persistence. Two of the biggest deals we've done recently, we've been after the people for 40 years.
That's something that's hard for a lot of people to understand, is a time comes when it's ready and you can actually do something, but if you're not talking with them and thinking about it and so forth, being rejected by them for all that time, Don't generally get success later on.
You don't control the order flow. The seller controls the order flow. And that means you gotta be ready.
Yeah.
You have to have scouted the properties, you have to have a wish list of properties. And we have found on the Cape at least, in Falmouth, that it's very handy to have what we call an opportunity fund. Not an endowment, that we have an endowment to try to keep the whole place going years ahead. But to have I'm not gonna call it a slush fund because it's not. But we call it the opportunity fund. So when these deals come up, you can act. The town can't act very quickly. The town takes forever to get its act together. And it just takes the time between when you do the deal and town meeting and everything else. We also had advanced over $1 million to the state to buy a property 20 years ago. And the state paid us back. But to make the deal happen, you have to be able to act.
So in a way, would you say that you and Tom were the opportunity fund?
Yes.
For the land in Stow?
That's exactly right.
You bought it.
For you, yes.
And then, can I ask a couple of other questions, or are you?
Sure.
Are you? One of the things that has always interested me about Stow is the fact that, for the most part, there's no town water, and I think that one of the things that has done is kept us from having tons of stuff with stores or tightly built things, housing developments and so forth. Was that ever a decision made in relation to this?
May I assure you, I don't know whether the town still ever seriously considered a public water system. I don't know.
Not that I'm aware of. And
I don't know.
And I think, on the other hand, Nancy, there's been considerable thought about not having a public water.
Right.
Right.
About what?
Not having a public water.
Yeah.
Sewers, if you can prevent sewers and water,
Yeah,
you can prevent really high rise.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that we did.
As long as you protect the environment while you're doing it. Yeah, where we are on the Cape is a very fragile environment. And this Habitat for Humanity project has got the latest IA advanced IA system that basically takes all the nitrogen and
Yeah.
phosphorus out of the system.
Oh, yeah.
And this project where the Habitat is building, it's in 3 watersheds. So, and the Cape, everything is so fragile. We're sewering a large part of the town. We simply have to do it. The estuaries on the Vineyard Sound side are just going to be gone.
Yeah. The other thing that has interested me, and I think I really first heard about it when we saw this thing a year ago, and he did such a great job.
He did.
But I'd forgotten that part of the money that you and Tom raised was by selling lots. How many did you sell?
I think I can't remember whether we sold 1 or 2 on
Okay.
Harvard Road. We sold 1.
And more on Taylor?
I'm sorry, we didn't sell any on Harvard, I'm sorry. We sold 1 or 2 on Taylor Road, beyond John and Kay Masway's house. They weren't happy with us, but that was what happened. And we had 1 contract with where the fellow who was head of Neshoba School at the time, Neshoba High School, Miller.
Roland Miller.
Yeah, he backed out of the deal with us. And, but we did buy 2 lots down on Harvard Road.
Yeah. Well, that seemed like a wise thing to have done on your part.
It was pretty obvious. We
Yeah.
needed more, if you can have a piece of property like that, you need access, and if you can drive.
I have one more thing to say, and then I won't interrupt, but
I'm done.
Tom, we had horses, and our children rode horses. Tom and I rode horses. I had to fall off a horse at one point. But anyway, we rode them in the town, and we loved all the various trails that there were in the town. And I think having ridden either before they became officially part of the town and after they did, and after the town forest was there, that was another thing that made Stow attractive to us. And Tom, as both of you probably know, always had this vision as we continued to buy the Conservation Trust and whoever, or the town, bought more land, he had this vision of Stow's emerald necklace. And that you would be able to get on a trail and do the whole circle if you had enough time to do it. I don't know that that's ever been quite achieved.
It's in the works.
We're getting it. We're getting it.
They're persistent.
Is what?
They're persistent.
They are
Yes, good.
Patience and persistence. That's the whole concept of linkage. You know, particularly from a habitat standpoint, it's much better to have land that's contiguous and larger areas of land, because that's what the animals and the reptiles and everybody else really prefer.
Well, thank you, Leonard. That's great. Be glad to know there are projects we're still working on 40 years later. We just got a donation from the Woodhead family last year of land that the town's been after for many years. Your comments reminded me of something that Mark Robinson often says, which is that the only land that's left has either bad title or bad families. It isn't a comment on the Woodheads, but it does seem to be the case often. Did you have anything else you wanted to say?
I think I've gotten it all in
Okay.
with those connections.
you.
Yeah, but
Thank you.
it's one, and I'm so glad that we continue to have, good, on both in your part and Stow Conservation Trust, such strong places. Yeah.
Yes. I have had a great time yesterday, the day before, rereading 2 years of Conservation Commission minutes, 3 years, from 73, 74, and 75. So a lot of interesting stuff that was unearthed. On the table back there, for folks who didn't have a chance to see it, there's the first map of Marble Hill. There's the map from the appraisal that shows what could have happened on this land, which is pretty frightening. The final payment that was made by the town, signed by C. Warren Smith, and an old open space plan. So there's some very cool stuff that we unearthed. And I just had a couple of historical notes I wanted to mention. It may have come out in the presentation of the video, but I just wanted to kind of reiterate that the town paid a total of $207,000 for 245 acres, or less than $1,000 an acre, which the town meeting presentation noted was not unreasonable for this area. And then half of that cost was reimbursed by the state. So for less than $500 an acre, we have Marble Hill today. From the Concom minutes of May 1974 was the chairman was congratulated on an excellent presentation on the Marble Hill project. Only 3 voted against it and withdrew their opposition to make it unanimous. That is how they did
Well,
it.
that was on the commission. The town meeting was unanimous.
No, this was from town meeting.
Oh,
The 3 had voted against it. and then-
Good moderators will call something unanimous if there's only like a few handful of boards to try to convince them to change.
But Dave told me it was unanimous.
Yeah. The original self-help application, the state grant program, is in the back, signed by Ethel Childs of Tuttle Lane, Robert Connington of South Acton Road, Lester Garvin of No Name Road, Raymond Holland of Sudbury Road, John Pocky of Gleasondale Road, Richard Savage of Crescent Street, who was chair at the time, and Dennett Withington of Great Road. So that was, it was on the Concom at the time. Now, the best thing I found in the files was 11 pages of handwritten notes that are the town meeting presentation from 1975.
That's great.
I'm not going to read all 11 pages, but I am going to read the conclusion, because when I read it, I went, so it says, now why should the town buy this land? What benefits can Stow expect to derive from such a purchase? The short-range benefits, say over 1 to 5 years, are fairly apparent. Stow would gain a recreation and natural area accessible from different parts of town. Since the land abuts Pompasitic School, it can be easily used for field trips and nature awareness classes. It will provide a springboard for a townwide trail network, a goal contained in our open space plan. As Richard Martin stated to the town meeting several years ago, land does not create the need for new taxes, people do. This was after a discussion of the tax benefits of protecting open space. And then finally, the long-range benefits are really incalculable. Who is to say what 257 acres of forested open space will be worth to the people of Stow 50 years hence?
Oh, there you go.
The time for preserving such land is while it was still available, the time to act is tonight. Not make that up.
My letter.
I don't know who wrote this. I think it was given by Richard Savage based on the town meeting minutes, but I don't know who wrote it. If anybody knows handwriting, you can tell if it's your hand.
Leonard, do you know?
No, I don't.
Does it look familiar?
50-year-old handwriting.
Would you recognize?
Not better than my handwriting.
A lot better than his handwriting.
That's a great.
So with that, let's have some cake and go for a walk.